All right. Welcome back. Here we are. I'm Andrew. This is Ty.
Ty. Hi.
It's been a couple of weeks again. Another flight for Ty, but happier flight maybe this time.
Yeah, no major accidents to report, no unbridled rage to any airline, undue or duly due rage to any airline in particular.
We're gonna
Just
keep him away from talking about airlines tonight. All right. Well, yeah, I'm coming to you from Northern Nevada as usual. Not, Ty, you're in Wisconsin now, back home.
back home.
How is the great state of Wisconsin? Do you
Good.
have
It is fall weather now. We are not getting anything above 50 degrees. It is pretty chilly and it's raining. It's miserable. I'm already getting seasonal affective disorder, so I need to inject myself with some vitamin D, maybe directly into my eyeballs, so I can see the world in a better light. Because I get super cranky and miserable during the winter months. So
I get it. I have not experienced it, but I can get that 9 months out of the year you've got a little darker scenario out there.
yeah, we're gonna stay
Just trying
positive
to
this year. I'm gonna take some supplements or something. I'm gonna find a way to beat this. Maybe it means planning another trip with an airline somewhere
yeah.
warmer, down to the Panhandle, or go out to
Something
visit
else
you
you
or
can
something.
complain about, right?
Yes, yes. Channel my anger.
Well, I was asking you what's going on in Wisconsin. I was trying to think, is there anything different about Nevada right now? And kind of this is our second voting cycle in Nevada, and I'm
Mm,
not used to it, but Nevada sends out mail-in ballots to everybody. So that's kind of what's going on in Nevada. Anything different? I don't know.
mm.
There's really much difference. It's dead. The leaves are changed to their lovely pine sagebrush. Uh, Actually, I hear the tumbleweed business is pretty good out here. You can you can buy tumbleweed
It's all right.
online. Yeah, you can sell it. It piles in the corner of our yard. I could sell it to you and ship it to you. You'd have to pay for shipping and handling.
That's hilarious. I just came back, so I had a trip to Hawaii, big brag here. But no, when you go through agricultural customs, they're like, "Are you bringing back any livestock or plants?" And I can't imagine that anyone in the state of Nevada cares whether or not you're shipping off tumbleweeds to other parts of the U.S.
Right. That's a that's an odd suitcase. It's really light.
Your
What
suitcase,
what do you
you put
use? Do you use
yeah.
packing peanuts? Like it would break.
What they don't tell you is if you load it up with enough tumbleweeds, your suitcase begins to roll off. The jetway.
Can't put it on a shipping pallet and wrap it with saran wrap.
Oh, that's too
Oh, that's
funny.
funny.
Oh man.
Well, let's
How
get
much did they
into it.
go for? Wait, I can't let this go. How much did they go for?
Yeah. I haven't looked into it. I've just heard that people actually do it.
That is so
I
funny.
think the big draw is for like movie studios, movie sets. When you want the tumbleweed to fly across or whatever.
Right on.
But go figure.
I love it. That's too funny.
Um, well, I thought we would start again with the news like we did last time. That seemed to be a nice segment. There's some headlines going on that actually I saw one today that kind of circled back to our previous conversation about the Queen
The Queen.
and about King Charles. I see that he gets to be crowned in May next year.
It's a slow moving process.
Good thing.
You'd think they would just disband the monarchy like after the Queen. It's like it pretty much is done. Like we saw her rule from, over 100 years ago to, now it's like a whole different thing. I'm just surprised. Like, yeah, I don't know. What is Chuck gonna do? Is he gonna make any change? I don't know. Like, I'm not king, but I feel like it's kind of one of those things where it does feel like the end of an era in a way. But I could be wrong. I'd be really interested to see, they try to make this more relevant or bring about change. I mean, it's kind of like when Francis the Pope came in. a lot of change, a lot of buzz, and now it's kind of just all
Uh-huh.
the same stuff now. So
I think I heard that he's the oldest person to be crowned that will be crowned. What if he passes away before he's crowned? All that preparation goes out the door. I guess you could do it for Prince William. I think he's next in line.
the
I don't know.
next, yeah,
Just assume that same date. Don't change it. Everybody's in town.
yeah, yeah. I feel like I don't. We could have a in and out. This could be like the shortest rule. Go from Elizabeth to the longest reign that we've seen many years to this might just be the shortest record. So
Yeah.
go from longest to shortest back to back. It's funny.
Well, and speaking of old ladies that live beyond their years, Angela Lansbury died today, early
Did she die?
yesterday. Yeah, I
Oh
think she
no.
was like 98 or something like that.
No, see, this is so embarrassing. That's Mrs. Teapot, right? That's
Yeah,
Murder She Wrote.
yeah.
Okay.
Remember
I
she
want to make sure because
court jester.
I always confuse her with Phyllis Diller. I don't know why, or at least the name I do. But Angela
You
Lansbury, I do.
remember her in Court Jester?
Court gesture. Oh, she was the queen, right?
She was the princess.
Oh, the princess. Yeah, yeah.
She
She was
she
much
had no
younger than,
love for
yes,
her
Danny Kaye.
father.
Yes,
That's when
Danny
she was
Kaye.
really young, and I only have known her since she was seemingly really old.
Yeah, she's just always been old.
Yeah, yeah, that shaky, wobbly voice
Oh
and
my gosh, so she's died. Oh
sweet
man,
lady,
rest
right?
in peace,
An
Angela
icon.
Lansbury. We're losing icons,
Yeah.
true hallmarks. I mean, who's next? Shatner, I guess. I don't know. He's up there. He's over 90. It's
Oh,
crazy. Um, and news of the church, just I was really pleased with General Conference that took place. The Church
that
of Jesus
was
Christ of Latter-day
awesome.
Saints did their 192nd semi-annual General Conference. So we're like 8 years away from 200 years of these things. So I'm hoping for, you got to be holding your breath for something really special for the 200th annual. Yeah, I'm assuming they're going to do something. So you got 8 years to prepare for it. Better be big. But
Well, let's have Jesus come before then, and we'll be okay. Who cares about the 200 part?
yeah, 8 more years. I can make it 8 more years. If things don't dramatically escalate.
I'm
Or
trying to get to
careen off a
tomorrow.
cliff.
Come on.
We better be months away.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
All the speculation. Uh, yeah, no, General Conference. Yeah, we missed that. Um, were you in Hawaii for General Conference?
Thankfully, so our trip was the very next day. So Saturday and Sunday sessions. Monday morning was our flight, so we left early
Okay.
Monday morning. But I was worried we were going to miss traveling back home, but thankfully it was just before we left. So it was really nice to get all the messages in and then travel and think about it and just carry that through
I
the week.
loved. I'll bring this up. I loved some uh, references that President Nelson made. Um, at the beginning, he talked about making sure that you take notes, during the conference and looking for truth, and like he has, I think, probably the past few conferences. But he had one line: each time that you seek for and follow the promptings of the Spirit, each time you do anything good, things that the natural man would not do, you are overcoming the world. Isn't that awesome? And I guess I'm bringing that up because that's a little bit why I'm doing this podcast with you. Is I just had the prompting. I don't feel like I'm contributing something that no one else could contribute, but it's trying to help people be informed, and I enjoy talking to you about it. So I don't know.
The feeling's mutual, and I love to hear myself talk. So I'm getting that catharsis from that. So
That's hilarious.
I do love that, though, the idea that I mean, it's funny because there's so much like noise, and I think a lot of it's just distraction, but a lot of people just need your attention for so much time. And it made me sad to think how much I was looking at my phone, even on this trip. Like I was like, wow, any downtime whatsoever, my instinct, and if it's reflex or if it's just habit, I just reach for my phone and I look at it, and I might not even be looking for anything in particular, but everything's on there. My wallet, uh, information, photos, calendar, events, stopwatch, all the things like calculator, all the tools and devices that you need. It's like all in one device. So like, but I notice I'm just staring at it blankly, not even like looking for anything in particular. And it is sad that like it's a go-to and a reflex, whereas back when I was younger, it was, using your imagination, thinking about the day's events, thinking about what I was going to do, things that have already happened in the past. There just seems like less time for reflection. Now it's just constant, you're consuming product, or you're just simply mindlessly entertaining yourself. They're both consumption in a way, but or getting a task done. So
This is
I
why
like
I'm
that.
not a minimalist, actually.
Yeah.
I have I, I seriously have fears about what could happen to us if we don't have technology like the internet, or like our phones for some reason aren't like. I mean, I know who uses the scriptures and they download updates on prophet talks and everything. Like, not just that, but everything that we do is all around the phone. Like you're saying, your wallet.
Yeah, I mean, our dependency on these devices has become astounding and quite an alarming rate, because I feel like it's um more so, like I almost felt like 10 years ago, even as easily as 10 years ago, you could still say like you could be a contrarian and like have a flip phone, but I don't even think it was like
You
crazy
can still.
nowadays. Yeah, now and it was
You
like
can have
obviously.
a flip touchscreen phone.
Yeah, but nowadays, like I said, it's so convenient, but it's like you couldn't even imagine leaving your house, let alone the next room, without your phone, is my point. And
Uh,
I feel like that attachment to our devices, that's what I find so, I
yeah.
mean, not only
Uh,
alarming, I find it disturbing. Like I said, some days I'm like, oh, I'll go without it, or I'll regulate the time. You can like, put apps on your phone to track how much time you use, or give you a reminder like, hey, you've used this much time, stop using. I don't use most of those things because I mostly use my phone for work, and I need it for calls, I need it for submitting applications and things like that. But I am,
the
again, even
convenience.
leaving the room, I won't leave my room with, I won't leave my phone with my kids, I won't. And it's kind of the sad that it's almost like another ticking time bomb in my house that I got to worry about. And that urgency in which, oh my gosh, I left the room. Where did I leave my phone last? And it's in the house. I'm like panicked if I don't know where it is. And I'm like, yeah, it's out of control. So I don't have the solution for it yet, but I'm going to come up with some practices this week. And I'd like to challenge myself
Well,
to
like I
see.
said, this is why I'm not a minimalist. I've got
Yeah,
books everywhere. I've got paper everywhere. I'm trying to convert, but it's hard to get rid of that stuff.
I know. And it's interesting too, because, like we'll still do hoarding characteristics where I will hold on to like photos and video that I took from years ago, and I don't go back and watch any of them or look at any of them. But I'm
Right.
just collecting all this data and all this
Uh,
information, and but like you said, papers, things strewn about, but it's all on a phone, so it looks organized. But it's almost like this device is blowing up, and
yeah.
somehow it's increasing in its value and importance to
Your
me.
storage limits are nearing capacity. Yeah. How many times
Yeah,
have we
when that happens,
gotten
like,
that
you just
notice?
better build a bigger phone, or like a bigger storage space for my phone, because I got to keep all the crap and device that I'm toting now, and I have to make sure that it fits on my new device. So yeah, if the new device
I
comes
go
out,
to my managed storage and it says that the most of my storage is being taken up by the phone's system. And it's wait a minute. What am I doing?
that was my favorite, when they'd sell you the iPad or the iPod when it first came out, to be like 32 gigs, and then you put it in your computer and you're like, how, I can only download 29 gigs. Like,
Yeah,
well, there's a processing power chip in it. It's like, well, then don't, false advertising. But they're like, no, 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 it is still memory in there, but it needs to run the system. I'm like, oh,
yeah,
that gimmick. Don't, well, then put in 3 more gigs so it has as many as I anticipate it's
right.
going. I'm a stickler like that stuff, by that stuff,
Yeah.
because I remember, I think my first video iPod had, I think it was 32 gigs. And yeah, so I guess it was like around 28, 29 of just video and music that you could put onto it. And that makes me laugh now, because like now phones are like, oh, here's 128 gigs. And I'm like, oh, I'll never fill up 128 gigs. I'm like, you've clearly never seen my phone. Like, I've got video, like
Right.
minute long videos of like slow mo, my kids will get my phone, they get,
Oh, and
like
take
as I
pictures.
wishes, and they're
Oh, yeah.
taking pictures and video.
the live
just
photos take up.
all that.
Yeah.
And then I get overwhelmed. I'm like, I can't even delete all these in, in a meaningful time. So I'm like, they're just gonna stay on there forever.
Yeah.
So like look through photos, I'm scrolling through and I'm like, oh, this is a day that my daughter clearly got a hold of my phone. There's like hundreds of thousands of pictures and video that she took. Oh, so anyway,
Uh,
but
so
good stuff. Our dependency on the devices. And here we are meeting on our
on a
computer
device.
on a
And we're
device.
using it to broadcast on YouTube.
Exactly.
Well, so what else happened? We had see the war in Ukraine, of course, Russians and Ukrainians. And this is good to bring up. What do you think? Why do you think our audience ought to know about what's going on in Ukraine? I have my opinion. I was just curious what you think.
Uh, I mean, I've heard like both sides of this. So I find it fascinating that we've now, I think we're upwards of 60 billion, maybe that's inflated. I know it's over 50 billion dollars that we've sent to Ukraine. And we, as far as I know, we don't have a single US troop over there fighting this war. Now, it is kind of like a war by proxy, in my opinion, because I think if you aid a country by upwards of $50 billion, I think you could at least argue that you're an ally of the person you are giving the money to. So
Well, and the reality is, even Vladimir Putin, he knows. Like, you go to
yes,
Europe, and it's not like, is this the Ukrainians versus the Russians? No, this is the Ukrainians funded by the U.S.
right,
fighting against Russia. Like, it's not even a proxy war at this point. It's
right, right.
it's a flat out war.
Right. And I've heard the tensions being ratcheted up because I've been out of the loop for the last week and basically getting back to it. I'm like, oh, like it seems like tensions are ratcheting up. You have Biden coming out saying like we're on the brink of nuclear war. And so why is this significant? I mean, it's crazy, but like, the last two world wars that were fought is over. It's like global escalations that, so how do I put this? So like we're not even like no one's invading our land, but this is where world wars break out, where you have a country encroaching on another country's resources or land, and somehow the US gets involved to the point where it's like, okay, Putin, you're being such a bad actor here. Are you going to stop? Are you going to be satisfied with Ukraine? And I think that's what most people believe. He's talking about like the homeland. This is his mission in life or whatever. This is his I don't know. This is like his crowning achievement. He can claim back all the Polanders or take
His
all these
claim to
Ukrainians.
fame
I said
as
Polanders,
the
God forbid.
president is to reclaim all this land.
Yes, for claim back all this land from Ukraine and take all the Ukrainians and make it part of Russian homeland again. And yeah, it's devastating to watch because it was weird to see this stories come out that weren't true, like Ghost of Ukraine or Ghost of Kiev, I think it was called. There was a lot of fabricated stories at first that were like it was like media's attempt to try to manipulate us into caring about this. But the truth is, a lot of people are devastated by this. Like no one that I know is like advocating outright for Putin. And unless it's like
Right.
for the use of a joke, but like it's ironically, but everyone is like, yeah, like we're told to care for Ukraine, and we're supposed to look the other way from any corruption that existed before this, like Vladimir Zelensky, anything that he was involved in, or even his supporters or whatever. The guy is no uh you know not as white as the driven snow, I guess you could say. He's
Right.
had his political rival jailed, I think. So anyway, there's that stuff too. So it was funny that you came out as a Putin apologist when you stood up for, or you not even stood up for Putin, but you were like, oh, like should we be sending all this aid over when we have like so many problems here in the US? But I've heard the other side too, where they're like, it's pretty remarkable that we can fight this war and weaken Vladimir Putin, who was probably the second global superpower, second to China, without even losing a single American life. And I thought that was pretty remarkable hearing that. But again, I'm like, is this just propaganda for the industrial military complex and encouraging us to spend all this money to keep shipping weapons over and keep this war
Well,
going?
so here's my take, and you
Yeah,
can take
I'd
what
love
you
to hear
want
your
on
take.
this. Um, I heard a commentator talking about how, I mean, we of course have all this grain that Ukraine has all of this grain that's key to our imports. key to their exports, right? They have a lot of resources that we kind of depend on.
And manure,
We
right?
can get
Or
by without.
fertilizer. They have a lot of
Sorry.
fertilizer too, right? They're like the number one export of
Oh,
fertilizer.
are they? I wasn't aware of that one,
Hmm.
but they were also saying this commentator was saying that more important than that, if we let a major power in Europe go unopposed to lands where he thinks that he should be the ruler or she, then we just like that. What kind of we're sending back all of these European countries to a medieval type of ruling system. We're taking steps back on something that needs to be that we thought, and for all intents and purposes, was already peacefully taken care of, right?
Right.
And that's, I mean, the point of NATO is that there wouldn't be another player like that, like a German Hitler or the German First World War. I don't know if they had a one leader or not. I guess I'm not that versed in the history there, but
I remember
the
Franz
whole,
Ferdinand.
yeah, well, the whole point which Russia signed on to was that people had the freedom to say these are our borders and this is how I want it to be, or this is how we want it to be. And if somebody tries to invade us, then we can appeal to NATO to say, hey, come help us out because these guys shouldn't be here.
Mhm.
And I mean, there's another headline today in the AP News was that Ukraine has committed war crimes, or sorry, there's war crimes in Ukraine
Mhm.
against Russia that had bombed Kiev over all these retaliations. Yeah, what we missed, what you may have missed while you were in Hawaii, was
Right.
it appeared, well, you had the vote right before general conference. You had the vote by these independent states that they wanted to be under Russia's rule, which was a fraudulent vote. But that meant that um, Russia had the right to defend those provinces because they voted to be a part of Russia now. Now they're Russian or territory. So there was that part of it. And right after that vote happened, there was a counteroffensive by the Ukrainians that took back most of that territory. That Russians, they surrounded a big, I want to say thousands of Russians
Oh,
soldiers without retreat, and uh, they're in a tight spot. But now it's Russia's dropping bombs on Kiev and all that these crimes, which we've heard from the beginning. It's not like NATO is actually doing anything about it, which is interesting.
that was the other thing too. So I remember that Ukraine was basically on their knees at this point, being like, "Let's get into NATO." But again, that they can't. It's kind of weird to me where, it's is it like a bit too late? Like I never want to say that's like the ship's already left, or you haven't contributed to this alliance, believing that you'd make it on your own. Now in your moment of need, are we going to turn our back on people like this? I don't know what the right answer is because I'm not
Oh no, it's and
anywhere.
it's a lot more complicated than that. I
Right.
mean, part
On
of the
top of that,
reason.
the last story I heard though, real quick, was about the Nord Stream pipelines being blown up. Like the basically, as I
Which
understand it, they
is
came out and
almost
said
certainly a
a
Russian
Russian thing.
synthesis. Yeah,
But it
bomb.
is it is striking that Biden, in an interview to I can't remember which reporter it was, but he basically said there will be no Nord Stream pipeline if they, and like I don't know which part that you would
Oh,
invade, but they're like
well,
it's not going to
President
be
Trump
invaded.
called it years ago too. I mean, and
Oh, okay,
even Mitt
interesting. I
Romney,
wasn't
when
aware of
he
that.
was running for president, that was one of his biggest things, is that Russia's the number one threat, and people just laughed him to scorn.
Right. And so I find that was the last story that I heard. And I thought, how, like, so I guess the reason they would self sabotage like that, though, because that's their pipeline to get
Right.
resources and energy to other states. Was that essentially to make them dependent and turn to Russia? Like, was this a self sabotage to black
It's,
out all
yeah,
of Europe?
just to prove that. I mean, Putin's off his rails anyway, right? It's just to
Hmm.
prove that he's better than everyone else. And actually, that was a headline yesterday, as the Paris went dark. because of energy crisis, and it's going to
Right.
get worse as the winter goes by. And
Oh, I know this is going to be a crazy
interesting.
winter. My gosh, my heart goes
But
out
I
to
was
those
going to
people.
say that, so we talk about the defense of Ukraine, but the whole reason for having NATO was to to point out that these smaller European countries, that they didn't have the strength and the numbers to win a land war. So if they needed help, then they could call on all the other powers to assist them.
Right.
But that's just turned out to be, okay, America, you keep your army. All of us, we're gonna stop having a, a what's a reserve army. No, and
Right.
that's not
Or even
completely
contribute
true.
a portion of their GDP, which I know what Trump was getting on them about. They're like, oh my gosh,
Right.
Trump is like threatening our allies. Like they need to pay their fair share. Of course, they didn't phrase it that way, but it was always like, Trump is like irating all of our allies. Why is he doing this? He's going to cause up all this problem. Like, as I understand, he's asking everyone for their fair share. I don't think that's like necessarily an evil thing to do. Like,
No, all
yes,
right.
if we're
Yeah.
fitting the bill, like, why is it that America should be the only one fitting the bill? Like, we're not asking everyone pay an equal share, but let's talk about, a percentage point. Like, everyone can contribute the same amount. And yes, maybe countries, I don't know. You look at the progressive tax system that we have now, it's like you just get taxed higher and higher the wealthier you are. So I guess it would make sense to someone in that mindset, like, well, we have more, so should be giving exponentially more. But it's like, I think what's more fair is giving everyone an equal responsibility in this, because the idea that you can live recklessly, it's kind of like the teenager that you don't cut off.
Yeah.
You live, they leech off of you, and then they're completely unprepared for the world out there on their own. And it's like, I guess if your rest of your life in existence, you're thinking, well, we'll just be beholden to the US. Like that's what astounds me. Like you said with ground war, it's like, if this was ever an issue, like I can't imagine the US would have any issue like with Canada, with Mexico. Like ground wars don't exist. That's why I think this blew me away watching
Yeah.
Putin invade Ukraine. So I was like, this is something of the
Weird.
past. Like
Yeah.
it's very strange.
Well, and actually, another headline that kind of addresses this issue in a different way today in the AP News again, is that the army, that there are fewer people being recruited into the National Guard than those that are leaving the army.
Oh, so yeah, the replacement rate. So yeah, they're
So
dwindling.
yeah, it's like if you think of the birth rate, right? If it goes below like 2.1%, then that means you're in a declining
Wonder
population rate.
I wonder like if that has to do with messaging or if it has to do with culture. I think largely part of culture, because I think
Oh,
the
I think
expectation was, and again, maybe it shifts, because I know like as soldiers return from Vietnam, they ostracize them, they turn them into criminals. They bombasted our poor veterans that came home, and like they were just like serving our country. I
well,
was doing my duty
yeah,
that I thought I was supposed to do.
and we've
And
talked
now,
about it before
yeah,
that with Biden forgiving loans, that's taking away a huge part of the army's recruiting.
yeah, because the military, that gave them, they would give good student loan forgiveness, the first down payment on homes. Like they gave a lot of great perks, and also like the
Absolutely.
status, like the idea that you would come home as a war hero, you'd be decorated with medals and essentially be. You would seem to be more stable and attractive. Maybe you could land a girlfriend after that, because you have esteemed and status and a career you could make out of it. Whereas now it's just like, uh, it's like, what is appealing about it anymore? Like like I think we've shifted culturally where it's like, yeah, like, oh, fighting in war, it's a terrible thing. Like I'm a totally non-interventionalist. We should get out of the war in Ukraine. We should be just focused on the problems here. And well, I do like that mindset, but I mean, we've had real tragedy strike, you know, our own soil. I'm particularly talking about September 11th in 2001. But like regardless of what you think about, like however libertarian you are and how we should be retreating from these other places, like yeah, I don't think Ukraine should be left to fend on their own, even though they're not part of NATO. But you're right, no one's doing
Well,
anything.
I
Biden, like he talks this game, but it's like the White House has walked back what he has said. He's like, if this is the commander in chief, like who are we supposed to believe? The White House press secretary that comes out and says, oh no, Biden didn't mean these things. I'm like, well, this is clearly not the leader we're supposed to have right now. Like, that's bonkers to me that you have a leader that's literally everything that he's saying is having to be walked back by his
he can't say
chief of staff.
what he should be doing.
Yeah, it's like,
He
oh, you
can't
said it,
leave.
oopsie. Like, he's not allowed to say that, or no, we all collectively agree that that's wrong, but he's just talking as a politician. I mean, uh, like I said, geopolitical stuff is so crazy, and I feel like right now there's a heightened sense, like, I don't believe hindsight's 2020 or 2020. I don't know whether or not Putin would have invaded while Trump. What we do know for a fact is that he didn't invade the entire time while Trump was in office, but he
Right.
has recently invaded ever since Biden has been in office, and now we're experiencing all this like turmoil. But it seems, like I said, it seems far away. But like, I heard that in the news article today, it was like some kids are going hungry right now because they no longer qualify, or they're not getting meals for kids at school.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, now you have like US kids that are going hungry. And I'm like, that's
Yeah.
devastating. That's
Well,
absolutely
and I was
horrible.
gonna say this is, I mean, we've got some serious issues that
Mm,
there's a civil war coming, and will it be on the ground? Probably not like our previous civil wars, but it's already here. Really, I mean, we're fighting against ourselves and our principles, and we need to figure out what our principles are, what who we're fighting
yeah.
for.
I
I
think
just
like,
had another thought
yeah.
about general conference. Somebody mentioned. So I didn't get this. Maybe did you pick up on President Nelson being kind of overcome with he'd made a message? Maybe I was taking care of one of my kids or something, but he got kind of choked up about it, maybe hinting that he wouldn't be at the next conference or something would happen
Oh,
between.
interesting.
I know I didn't pick up on this,
No,
so
no, I really
I
got to go
mean,
back and
I yeah,
deep dive. Interesting. I didn't pick that up personally, but like I said, I do want to go back and listen. I got the sense that it, to me, it breaks my heart. So for example, when I hear messages about like, listen, members of the church, it is never okay to have to tolerate any abuse of any kind. And I'm like, oh man, they really have to spend their time talking about these kinds of messages. Like, do we have members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that are actively involved in this kind of behavior?
yeah, we
And it's
do.
despicable, and
It's
it's
sad.
upsetting to me. I'm like, I thought we were well past this. I thought like this is a relic of the past, but I'm like, this is clearly still an issue that otherwise they wouldn't be addressing it. And I'm like, again, I can't help but think that COVID, the increase in substance abuse, domestic violence, all these issues that arose from the pandemic, from unemployment, all these tragedies, the increased hysteria that we have about, the polarization, like you said, the civil war that's common, all these things, um, it's it's like pushing everyone to like their breaking point. I remember Jordan Peterson once mentioned, he was talking about unemployment, and I don't know if he's like quoting a statistic, but he's like, basically every percent of unemployment is like that many more people that are teetering on the edge of just making ends meet. Like, every percentage point that goes up, like there's thousands of people that die. And it's
Mm,
basically whether they take their own life or they simply can't make ends meet. But like, I found it fascinating to think that, and in a sad way, obviously not a good
right.
way, but
Yeah.
like every 1% of unemployment that goes up, that's like thousands more people that they just making ends meet, and now they're pushed over the edge because of inflation or because they've lost their job. They're not making ends meet, and they're in the red, and like they're drowning. Like,
Oh yeah.
and it is sad because like, here in America, I believe it's a land of opportunity, and you can make something of yourself, and that's like the American dream. And it is really sad to see so much despair, and I'm seeing more and more of that with the talks that we're given, because a lot of them return to, you need to find like inner peace. Which sounds funny when I say it. Inner peace sounds like a yoga slogan, but a lot of it was like, you need to come to terms with God, and you need to like correct the behaviors that you're doing. Like, and a lot of it was why I was thinking a lot about my phone usage. I'm like, I need to like distance myself from my devices, unplug, just metaphorically and literally, like leave my phone on the table, leave it aside, and like meditate more often like I used to when I was younger. And I think I think that was the messages that I was getting, was like a
Yeah.
return to distancing yourself from this tribalism. They mentioned tribalism too, which was like, you need to be respectful of members that believe differently than you, of people that belong and identify differently than you. And I'm like, is that really an issue? Because for me, it's like, I have no problem with anyone that believes a certain way. I do have a problem with indoctrination and perversion toward children. But again, you're like, not every single person that thinks differently or is involved in that. I'm like, yeah, I know. But see, I'm able to distinguish between the two, but I think some people might get caught up in thinking like, oh, this person believes this way, therefore they must agree also with the fact that children should be exposed to this stuff or whatever, right? Like a lot of people make these leaps and bounds, like they'll misjudge someone and think that they attribute all the negative characteristics to somebody that thinks differently than them. So I got
I
that
think it's a
sense.
deeper culture. I mean, because I was actually talking with someone earlier tonight about how when we were missionaries, we all saw like the zealous missionary types that are uh, they're out to get you. They're like, if a Jehovah's Witness comes along, let's do the Jehovah's Witness shuffle and read them all the scriptures to prove to them that they're wrong. We're not out there to prove anybody wrong. President Hinckley was like huge on this. Take your good and let's add to it, right? We're like, if they're Christian and they're not going to be moved by us, just love them because they're Christian. Love them because they're your neighbor, and
Yeah,
they have some different beliefs, but it's the same within the church.
we're going to get along a lot better if we started pointing out where we're similar as opposed to fighting over where we're different.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I will say, I will be going back to listen, and heaven forbid if we lose. I
I
feel like
know.
Wilson's made so many great strides and
Oh,
change in the
yeah.
church. It's crazy to think if I'm gone, I can't even think about it.
It's actually
He's pushing
this is the
97,
kind of
98.
this is the kind of podcast that we can talk about this, but yeah, I I was not necessarily looking forward to having President Nelson be the prophet before he was made prophet. And well, I thought about
Had
this
reservations.
more. What's that?
You had
I
reservations.
had reservations.
Like, oh, some big hot doctor, heart surgeon. Big
But
deal.
the moment that I saw him after he was ordained prophet, like he had a news conference, I immediately had the impression that he's the prophet. And I had a similar impression with President Monson, and I can remember having a similar feeling with President Hinckley as well, which in my knowledgeable lifetime, those were the only prophets that I really understood.
Mm.
Um, yeah, no, it was really interesting when I heard that, and actually, our bishop spoke to your point. Um, he mentioned that there's that speculation. Again, I didn't pick up on it, but it must have been big enough that other people did. And he said, I exactly what you said. He said, I saw a man who's 98, an old man that's getting tired of saying the same thing. Like you're saying, we're talking about abuse, emotional abuse, mental abuse,
Physical,
physical abuse in conference.
and this was something that he literally said back in April. Like, I remember this, and I'm like, oh, there's 2 talks about it, and here there was another 2, maybe even 3 talks about it. And I'm like, what is going
Yeah,
on? Like,
yeah,
yeah, there's something in the water, man. And I think part of it is like that desperation, whether you've just now opted into, drowning in your responsibilities, or the weight of the world and Satan's influence on you feels so crushing at times that you're no longer hopeful. You no longer have like virtues of Christ. You literally just feel like you're staring into the black abyss, like the deep despair. And I get a lot of hopeful messages, because even though that they're using their time to say these messages, I take hope in knowing that everyone I know, and most of my friends and colleagues and even extended family, none of them deal with these things. And obviously that might be undercover, and that might be something that I'm not privy to, but I'm hopeful that there are more and more people that aren't involved in this thing. And just because we hear talks about it doesn't necessarily mean. And obviously, I think it's great. It's like, it's almost to say, well, even if there was one family, this talk should be said so that one
right.
family stops suffering from it.
Well,
And I agree with
and
that. But
perhaps
Right.
that it is a worldwide church, right? So maybe
Yes.
because we had that message that we heard a lot through the 30 years or whatever,
Yeah.
and maybe a civilization in Africa, it's more of a problem there, or you know what I'm
No,
saying? Like
it would be the
it's not
French. We all can agree. It would be
necessarily.
the French that would have this problem, you know.
I'm gonna tag them in this video. All the French.
Like, this is for you.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Well, okay. We'll heavy subjects. We'll move on
Yeah.
to some more. The rocket, NASA sent a rocket to the comet.
Oh, that's right. The asteroid, right? Or
Yeah,
not,
or whatever asteroid. Yeah. Well, guess what? The headline today was that it significantly moved. So doomsday, that's not going to happen because of NASA. Thank you, NASA.
here's the thing, like, that asteroid is now headed somewhere else that it hadn't otherwise been intended to go. Now it's heading straight for a black hole. It's going to get zinged around, flipped around, and come right back at us at 3 times the speed. And we're never going to see it coming. I don't know. See, here's the thing, like the interventionalists, we're talking about Space Force and all that stuff. Dude, I'm watching a video right now. I'm going to read you its title. It's called, it's called The Disturbing Conclusion Black Holes Imply About Your Reality. The video
Oh,
done by
no.
Astrom. I highly recommend it. It's on YouTube. And basically, the whole notion is, I've heard a lot of weird theories about science and stuff, but this one basically is like, if you're walking along the beach, your feet leaves a sand print, and there's no question as to whether it was your feet that were leaving the sand print. Now, they're talking about reality and perceived reality and causation and all this stuff. So they're talking about the theory of relativity, how something can be perceived as one thing. Like, let's say a ship is moving and there's a room in a ship, and let's say it's a calm sea, but your room is moving on the ship and you're actually moving. But let's say you're in a house and you're not moving. Those two rooms are identical. Relatively speaking, you wouldn't be able to identify which room was which if all things were identical and it was a calm day at the ocean, right? So, but one is moving. Like the room isn't the same thing because one is moving and one isn't. And you might say, well, that's silly. Like, okay, so let's say you're just talking about the room in the house. We live on this planet Earth and we're spinning like hundreds of thousands of kilometers per hour, like circling the sun. Crazy stuff. And we don't feel like we're moving, right? So the relativity was they were talking about. But then they got into, okay, so you understand these concepts. And they're like, okay, now let's introduce a black hole, the way it works. And then they're like going to like how particles of light are going to it and being bent around it and how space around it is being curved. I literally got like some existential crisis mode because I was thinking about this asteroid and I'm like, oh, we did it. We like saved planet Earth, or we could stop the next comet that's headed toward Earth. And I'm like,
Our
how do
test was
you know
successful.
that? How do you know that? Like, how? I was watching, so when we were in Utah at Cameron's wedding. Sorry, Cameron. We were at Cameron's wedding. And Cameron and Kelsey's wedding. Mazel tov. Love you guys. We were at the Museum of Ancient Life and Museum of History, or whatever, Museum of Natural History or whatever. And they had this presentation about this comet that hit the Earth millions of years ago and wiped out all the dinosaurs. And I remember thinking, like, what a peaceful way to go, you know, being wiped out instantly. But basically the video said, like, no, what happened was, yes, if you were directly underneath the comet, it like obliterated you. But if you were far enough away, there was this blinding light that first hit you. And even if you had closed your eyes, you could see through your hands and through your bones. So even if you close your eyelids, you'd be instantly blinded. And then shortly thereafter, there was like a heat wave that came, and that heat hit your skin cells, and your the water would instantly vaporize. It would boil and then vaporize out of your skin.
They're essentially talking about an atomic bomb explosion.
Exactly. That's basically what it was. And then, like, so now you're blinded and now you're being boiled alive, and then you catch on fire. So all this crazy stuff. You're talking about avoiding asteroids, and I'm like, we just changed forever the trajectory of the asteroid we just hit. Now I know they're saying it's mission accomplished, but I'm just saying everything, like, how many other galaxies out there do they have life forms that are significantly impacting the planets in their solar system and doing this kind of stuff? It's crazy.
But maybe that's the post world, right? Because you're translucent when you're in the spirit world.
Right. Well, and again, like I said, I don't know. Like, I have a hard time with people bringing people back from the dead, like Commander Tarkin in Star Wars. It's like, this guy is dead, and we're CGIing and putting him back into movies. It's making him say things and appear that he's alive when he's not. I'm like, what are the moral implications of that? Now you have deep fakes. You have people witnessing people on Earth pretending to be other people using deep fakes to like say things. And you're like, I saw with my own eyes the actor. Some of these deep fakes look so impressive. You can't tell them from reality. And that's where that's one of the one things I wanted to mention was like the distortion of reality. It's like, is there an objective reality? Because technically, could you get to a point where it's like, oh, none of this is real, or we could simulate something that seems real to you, you know, kind of like the metaverse. I mean, not Elon Musk, what's his name? Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook. He wants to put us all in a virtual headset and basically live a life that's as real as this one. Except the only difference is, I don't know, maybe you can fly. I don't know. Maybe you live the same boring life in the metaverse as you would here. Or maybe it's just 1 ounce better, you know, and then you'll choose to live there rather than live in actual reality. Are we already plugged into the matrix? Crazy question. So I feel like this is a probationary time for us to choose good and evil. Choose good. Always choose good. Keep in mind that even if it is a simulation,
that's what this discussion boils down to.
It does. It does. Because like I said, even if it was a simulation, like that reminds me of like the plan of salvation. As Latter-day Saints, we talk about following God's plan. Like, we basically are in a simulation. We're all being tried here in a mortal earth so we can return to live with our Heavenly Father and continue to learn and progress forever, you know, learn to become as God someday. I love this doctrine because it gives me hope, knowing that even if people secularly just have to view it as, oh, we're just like in a video game, whatever you have to convince yourself, make the right choices, do the good things. Because even if you were so nihilistic and try to wrap your head around being a shadow from a black hole, this is what the end of the video is, I'm spoiling it for you, is basically we are footprints in a sand from some other being that's on the other side of the black hole, was the basic conclusion of it. And I was like, yo, you lost me at shadow of a being. Like,
but I'm Bigfoot's.
So thankfully, on the other side of that black hole, I'm probably a rich and wealthy king, but over here I'm some loser that sells life insurance. So I'm going to invest in my prime real estate and the next life. So I'm going to start doing the things now, so I know once I get through that black hole and my true identity comes from. Anyway, the video made me laugh, but I thought about it. Like, is it possible that we're a shadow people? And so anyway,
I'm gonna tie this into another headline.
Do it.
Okay, you ready for this?
I'm ready.
New Zealand wants to tax cow burps.
Yes, absolutely. Yo,
really, and this is real. This is real. Like, they really do want to tax the emissions.
On top of that, they were doing, was it Finland? One of the Swedish country. One of them was like already doing VR headsets for cows. Because they live in like this crappy pasture. They live. I'm not kidding.
So that's how we cure all the chickens. We just give them a virtual reality. Oh my god!
If you feel bad for their existence, just put a headset on them, and then we can make them think that they're in a green pasture. But have we asked the cows what they prefer to witness? You know, maybe they don't want to be a cow. Maybe they'd like to play a video game as a human or live in virtual reality as a human. Maybe they're trans.
Not be racist.
I don't know. Yeah, see, but I found this fascinating. Look this up. They have VR headsets for cows, and I'm like, poor cows, man. Like, oh my gosh, like that is literally the Matrix.
No,
but it's even more horrifying. We're not only being
duped into buying these cows' virtual reality headsets.
Like, with a cow, you had robots and technology that was enslaving humans so they could power its generators, basically feeding off of them. And like, literally, imagine being a cow and you like get the goggles removed and you're like, oh my gosh, they're eating us. Like, our existence is a lie. Unplug from the VR headset. I'm just saying, we literally matrixed, if that's a verb, the cows, and that's really sad to me. So anyway, so anytime you feel like you have a meaningless existence, just remember, be so grateful you're not a cow. I mean, holy
smokes. Well, but the cow's living a better life than me, because those virtual reality headsets are killer. I played one at my brother's house, and I think I got vertigo faster than anything in my life.
Is that right?
Falling into nothing. It was so weird.
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine. I've never used one. I don't know if I want to. It's like digital heroin.
It was too much for me. It was.
Yeah.
I enjoy some video games, but that was too much for me.
Oh, I hear that, man.
Well, let's move on to two other segments that we'll leave the headlines behind. There's lots to talk about.
For sure.
There were two topics that I wanted to bring up because they were brought up by my kids. So it's fathers with concerns. I might as well bring it up.
Father with concern and father with unbridled rage.
Right, unbridled rage. Yeah, fathers.
Fathers.
Nonetheless, I'm concerned about you, so it's fathers with concerns.
Right.
So my 10-year-old is a boy. We're living in northern Nevada, and the missionaries were over for dinner and asked him, "What is one of the hardest things for you at school?" And he said, "The swearing."
Mm.
So I wanted to get your take on that, with education and being in public school. I guess we can talk about our experiences. We can talk about swearing, cussing. I don't know. What are your perceptions on that whole idea?
Dang flabbit, there's too many curse words going around. No, and even substitute swear words. I actually I wanted to mention that I think that yes, the media more and more I'm seeing a shift that language is very steadily being more and more accepted in public spaces. Like news anchors are now cursing. You have podcasts that have no filter,
Is
and
it
even stuff that seems innocent enough, like video games, but it's like,
is it the FCC that controlled it before, like it that
um
like still controls it, like with TV
oh, see,
and
that's
all of that?
interesting. See, I don't, as far as I don't know who did the regulations. I know with like is it MPAA ratings from movies? Like
Um,
they used to have a pretty stringent line. Like I know you could have like, it was basically like what do you call it? It's like a puzzle piece. Like you can put in 2 F words as long as you don't have any sex or nudity, or if you have sex and nudity, you can allow for 1 F word in a PG-13 film, right? Rated R's, you could have many, many more. But it's just funny how like they like basically you could be like, okay, you build this pie, and if it gets too overloaded, they're gonna be like, no, it's an R rating. But a lot of people would studios would try to push PG-13 ratings because it would bring in a larger audience. You could convince parents to take their kids to go see it if it wasn't too outrageous or too extreme, right? Um, but more and more steadily, I've noticed that yes, in every space, podcasts, media, everything, more and more language.
yeah, I think since cutting the cable became a trend, now that streaming is a huge platform,
Right.
I think cussing is a bigger problem.
Yes.
But I I guess from my perspective, um, I'm a handyman, and I worked with some guys that every other word was the F word.
The sailors. Yeah. Sailor
Yeah,
mouth. Body mouth.
I don't think even sailors would curse as bad as some of these guys. But
Even sailors got to kiss their mamas good night every night. But these construction workers, man.
I just I it bugs me
Mhm.
when it's that frequent. Um, I don't even under my breath I say curse words, and I know that I shouldn't, and um, I'm glad that I don't cuss like that. I don't know. You have to live with it. How do we teach our children to live with that
That's a hard
and
one.
not let them be bothered by it?
Right. I think one of the things is obviously setting an example. I think is one of the best things you can do, because obviously if you ever find yourself criticizing other people for language and you don't take a hard look at yourself in the mirror and think like, is there anything in my language that I could clean up or be bettering myself on? Like I had friends at school and I never would curse, and my friends all knew that about me, and so as a courtesy, because they were my true friends, they wouldn't curse around me, and they would actually watch their language.
Yeah.
I thought that was really kind. Like, good. I was making an impact knowing that by my example, they were like, if I was saying like, oh, I shouldn't curse, but I do it anyway. And then my friends at the time would have been like, oh, like he doesn't care if we curse around him. Therefore we all curse. So that would be one thing, leading by example. And it's not easy to do, especially when it actually makes you stand out because a lot of the kids that were my friends at school, they would look at me and be like, "Oh, you're Mormon, so therefore you don't swear. You can't swear. What if I paid you?" Like all the silly scenarios. And what if I paid you to swear? What if you did this? What if this happened? Would you swear in this instant? All the silly scenarios and everything. I'm like, all this is distracting from the reason why I choose not to. I choose not to because personal reasons. I think it's important to inculcate a sense of pride in the words you say. I can't remember who it was that said basically foul language and crass language and curse words were all like a sign of unintelligence, which I thought was really funny.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot,
Mhm.
and to a certain degree,
We're all
I
getting
get
dumber as a
it.
society. We can all agree on that.
Well,
So
I can't follow a conversation of someone that swears every other word. Like, I
right.
just can't, because it's like, wait, are you using? How are you using that word? Like, what? That
Can you
doesn't make
use the
any
word?
sense. Do you realize that
use
your sentence is fragmented everywhere? Like, it does
You
not
keep
make
using that word. I
any
do
sense.
not think it means what you think it means.
Yeah, I just get like annoyed by. I guess that's the teacher in me, right? But
Hmm.
um, no, it is an interesting thing that I want to help Bruce with, and I don't quite know how to do it. Maybe it's like our next topic. It's like bullying, right?
Mm.
Uh, some things, bullying and teasing. So maybe I'll introduce this topic, right?
Mm.
So the similar conversation with the missionaries. They asked my daughter. She's in kindergarten. She's like, "What are you most concerned about at school?" And she said, "Bullying," right? And so yeah, bullying's not good. So coming back to the cursing, and maybe it's kind of like bullying where it's going to happen, and you're going to probably bully. You're probably going to swear at some point. You're probably going to be sworn at. Somebody's going to bully you, right? Um, Maybe it's just a way for us to repent, to get to acknowledge that we're not perfect and we do need to repent. And when I say that, I mean change to be better, right? Um, we can definitely have more empathy for people that are bullied when we've been bullied ourselves, you know, picked on. But there's an extent, kind of like what you're saying with your friends, when you are known for not being tolerant of something in particular, and that can be bullying too, then people try not to do that around you. And I think I brought this up in our last conversation, that President Nelson is known as someone that does not put up with contention. If he sees contention even on a TV screen, he'll turn it off.
Good
Or
on him.
if it's a conversation, a discussion, there's contention, he'll walk away.
Mm.
You know, and so like his inner circle, they know that he doesn't put up with contention, so they're not going to contend around him.
Right. That's good. And I think that's important. And setting that example for your friends, if they're truly your friends, they're going to respect that and model their behavior after you. Because let's say, for example, you said like, "Oh, I choose not to swear, but I don't mind if you swear around me," and you actually make that distinction. They'll be under the impression, "Oh, okay, like we'll just talk freely." But I don't think it's a bad thing to be like, actually, if you talk so foul around me, like I'm actually not comfortable being here.
Right.
Now, again, if they're like a true friend, they're gonna be like, yeah, that's not even a problem. Like, sure, we'll talk so everyone's comfortable. Maybe it's time to take a hard look and be like, are these really my friends? Like, they don't want to accommodate me. They don't want to make any changes for me. And I know that it sounds like you're entitled to better friends, but no, I mean, you'll find and attract those people because there are people out there that think that same way that you do, and that's not even necessarily for religious reasons, personal reasons. Um,
Well, and I think we talked about it earlier with conference,
mm,
and I got this message that I believe it was Elder Cook Sunday afternoon, right before President Nelson talked. He said something to the effect that I received the message that we're going to be under persecution again. And we've got to take a hard look at, like you're saying, what's our stance? where are we going to stand? And we're probably going to be alone because we have those standards.
Absolutely. And we've tolerated a lot for too long. I almost feel like we've become so lax in our belief system that we're like, well, I don't want to be a bother. I'm not going to stand up for what's right because someone might think differently than I am. But it's kind of like the bully situation where it's like, I don't think it's right to bully, but then you're not going to stand up and defend the kid that's being picked on either. So
Right.
it's
Which
like, do you have a
is
moral right or a moral duty to stand up and defend the kid that's being bullied? And I think that's part of the we've become so soft as I think, and this actually stands to conservatism just in general. Like, I don't think this country, a lot of people don't have a bigger sense of entitlement now because I don't think we have a lot that we're trying to preserve anymore. Like, we don't know what we should hold sacred in our culture. Like, we don't know, well, you shouldn't talk about these things. Well, now we do have some things, like you could argue woke culture is like good at monitoring, like you shouldn't be saying these things. Like I have a friend that's visiting from Kansas City, Kansas, and his football team's the Chiefs or whatever, right? And they're like, that's probably he's like well aware that the Chiefs is likely going to change soon. And we had a funny talk about this
because of the
because I
name.
thought, yeah, I'm like, okay, it is a little funny though, because if you change the team name, like, who is it helping? It'll cause some controversy. There'll be people for it and against it. Is anyone's lives going to be made better because of this? Probably not. And in fact, if it might even have the unintended consequences of making chief style
Obsolete.
merchandise more valuable because now it's retro, or now it's the
Yeah.
hot items because they're no longer in stock. They no longer make them this way. Now it's the new I don't know. It wouldn't be the Chiefs now.
Like
They
the
changed it to
Washington Commanders,
the
and it's no
Commanders.
longer the Redskins, it's the Commanders.
Exactly. So
So now we won't talk about Redskins ever again.
exactly. And you know, it's almost sad to me. It's a part of that history. Like I said, we're becoming dumber because right now it might be in the forefront of everyone's mind when you change it in the time being. But think about the long-term game. Like, you're going to be like, oh, they're the Commanders. And you didn't realize, like, oh no, just a few years ago they were called the Redskins. Like, oh really? Like, what is a Redskins? Like, well, this is actually this. I don't know if it's technically I know it's derogatory or even if a racial slur, but it's like, okay, so Native Americans, that early settlers here, they'd give him this term, and it's like, oh, so did they find it offensive at the time? Yes. Do they still find it offensive? I have no idea. I don't know who the spokesperson is for this. Like, oh, get the leaders of these organizations to come and be like, yes, we profess that this is offensive. It still bothers us to this day. And it'd be like, wow. Like, I mean, like, because it's so obvious if you were like, if it's like, I'm trying to think of like something really funny, the Cleveland crackers or something, white crackers or something like that. It would be funny to me, but it's like, as because maybe that's a privilege of never having been a minority. That's not necessarily true. I did live in Chile for 2 years, and I was widely the
Yeah.
only very few white people that were there. It was a minority. So I lived in Hawaii for a year too, also minority. But um, you know, having these derogatory terms, they didn't necessarily mean anything to me because, like, I guess I've elevated myself where, you know, sticks and stones don't break my bones, words will never hurt me. Um, or maybe I said that wrong. Sticks and stones will break my bones. But that goes back to the language, and the bullying is like, whose life was made better? I don't know. So in your own personal life, take control. The friends that you have, that you hold close to you, your friends, your family, instill in them your values and let them know that it matters to you. Because I think all too often we're too scared to let people know, because we don't want to lose friends. We don't want to lose
Oh,
family. We
right.
don't ostracize people. We certainly don't want to shame people for the way they live. If they just naturally curse a lot, we don't want them to feel bad about their decision to curse. But it's like, while you're in my presence, I really appreciate it. It would mean a great deal to me. I'm asking as a friend, you know, to clean up your language. Don't use these certain words around me, you know, when we talk about things. And if one slips up, I'm not going to like fine you. I'm not going to give you a ticket. I'm not going to do any
Yeah,
of
I'm
these
not gonna
things. I'm
say you're
just
going to hell or something like that. Oh,
exactly.
I just
You are
cursed.
doomed.
Sorry.
Strike three. You're out there. You're not my friend anymore.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I would just say, if you if these are truly things that matter to you, and you have good friends, it will matter to them as well. I promise you, because that was my experience. And again, you might be like, oh, I thought these were my true friends, but what matters to me doesn't seem to matter to them. I think it's time to go shopping for some new friends. So
Yeah,
that
right.
would be my advice.
Well, thanks again, Ty. We're getting kind of to the end of our hour. I appreciate your advice. I love it. Um, my final thought and takeaway, I think it's all encompassing. We've kind of intertwined general conference into this
Mm.
entire conversation, and there's a lot to learn from it. That's kind of my final thought. We got to go back and
Go
read
back and
a little
listen,
more.
and I'm going to go back and listen to see if there's anything in there that Nelson was dropping as a
I
hint.
know I've already listened to a few talks and I'm like, well, it doesn't sound like that. Maybe I have to watch them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm not picking up what he's laying down, but maybe there's something more subtle there. But you know, like I said, my takeaway is like whatever it is that's getting your goat, whatever's stressing you out, if there are things that do matter to you, you're asked by a missionary, what are your biggest concerns these days? You know, please take courage, because even as crazy as some of my mind wanders and goes down these rabbit holes and sometimes black holes, um don't need to be stressed
Then they
about.
spin back and hit you again.
Dude, I'm some other being on the other side of the black hole. I'm just a shadow. Everything I do is out of my control. See, again, it is sad because I feel like some people might use it as an excuse. So in the end, um you know realize that you do matter and you have infinite worth to your Father in heaven, and that's like what matters most. So if you feel like you've crawled into the darkest furthest corner away from God's love, there's no dark corner in this earth that you could hide that is too far out of his reach and his influence in your life. Please reach out.
Love it.
Whether that's to your friends, your family, your leaders, like you can feel God's love for you no matter how much
Yeah.
you feel like that's impossible. It's totally possible. So, and I felt that because I've
I've,
gone to some dark corners in
yeah,
my
I've
life.
got a close family member that recently had suicidal thoughts and had some depression and had to come back from his mission. And I haven't told him this, but it bothered me so much. I woke up one night and recorded a video just for him. I never sent it to him, but boy, you please realize that we care about people, and if if you ever doubt that, start turning to some other people and asking them if they care about you, and you'll see people say, "Hey, what can I do?" But you gotta reach out, like you're saying, like God. There's nowhere you can go that God won't reach. Love it.
For sure.
All
For
right,
sure.
well, thank you. Hope you have a good night. Thanks everyone for listening.
For sure. Happy days, folks. Happy days.